Hello and welcome everyone to today's episode of the Kianistan podcast. Joining us today, I'm very pleased to say that we have Alfred de Zayas. Alfred is a Cuban slash American slash Swiss lawyer, historian, and an expert on human rights. Alfred, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Pleasure.
Thank you, Alfred. Alfred, it's the first time we've had the pleasure to have you on our show. Would you tell us a little bit about your background? Maybe can you start with how do you self-identify? Do you think of yourself as a Cuban, American, or does it depend on the context?
Well, I am Swiss and I have lived in Switzerland for 44 years.
Oh, well.
I vote in every single referendum, and I feel that our semi-direct democracy is probably the best system of government that you can have. And then we are a multicultural, multi-ethnic country with 26 cantons, 4 languages, and everybody respects everybody else. It functions. And I wish that we would have that worldwide, that people would understand that the other guy, your neighbor, is not a priori a potential enemy. I mean, your neighbor is a potential collaborator, a potential friend, with someone you can build something. Be constructive, not confrontational. Whereas my education in Chicago, I grew up in Chicago, was very competitive. I mean, you're always competing against the other guy, and you want to show that you are better. And we are also educated in the United States, and that's part of the problem. We're educated that we are, by definition, the good guy, which by education means that the other guys are the bad guys.
It's black and white.
Are in a endless fight against everybody else. And instead of in a multilateral world, multipolar, where we can have international solidarity and international assistance, etc. And part of the problem is I'm a practicing Catholic, but I practice a Sermon on the Mount. I practice Matthew 5, 6, and 7. I don't practice the book of Joshua. I don't practice Deuteronomy. I don't practice Leviticus. I find that the approach of the Old Testament is that God created all humans, but then he only selected this little group. I mean, the idea of the chosen people, the idea of the elect, besides being absurd, it's very dangerous because it bears in it an aggression against everybody else. So that worries me in the religious sense. And when you read the Sermon on the Mount, you see that the name of the game is coexistence and concern for the other guy, and not just concern for yourself, not just me, and again me. So in the West, in particular in the United States, you have one megalomaniac after another. Because if you think of the Donald Trump, you think of the approach that he has to international law. As a matter of fact, he doesn't recognize international law. I always say to my students, and I've been professor of international law and of constitutional law in many universities for many years, besides my career, 25 years as a senior lawyer with the United Nations, and 6 years as an independent expert of the Human Rights Council, etc. My career has been primarily an academic career. And I've written, as you know, 12 books. I've written probably something like 500 scholarly articles. I've written 40 articles for encyclopedias, not the Wikipedia. I'm talking about serious encyclopedia. I've written for the Encyclopedia of Public International Law. I've written, for the Lexicon of International Law, for the Encyclopedia of Human Rights, etc., Oxford University Press, etc. But what I tell my students,
And what's your connection with Cuba, Alfred?
well, obviously, my mother was Spanish from Asturias, from Oviedo. My dad was Cuban, and the rest of the family, the Zayas family, which has been there for over a century in Cuba, they came primarily from Barcelona. So we're partly Catalan and partly Asturian. And as the case may be, I grew up as a young, privileged boy in Havana. And when the revolution took place, not that we were against the revolution, but the revolution brings with it revolution scaffolding.
Yeah.
Oh, you close the schools. There's some,
Yeah.
It's not safe, especially not safe for a child.
Sure.
So my uncle, who was an American, and my uncle migrated from Spain, United States, became an American citizen, was a captain in the U.S. Army, then became a very successful businessman, was married to an Irish girl, and they had no kids. So he took my brother and me. So we grew up in Chicago. I love Chicago, by the way. I mean, I was in the St. John Fisher Parish, not far away from the parish of Pope Leo the 14th. I mean, it was just almost down the block from me, except that I'm older than Leo. As the case may be, I have great memories of Chicago and of the way that I was incorporated into this wonderful Irish family. I love the Irish. As the case may be, I went back to Chicago as professor in 1993-94, and I've been back since, and I was a member of the International Human Rights Institute there, and I have good friends in Chicago. I don't like New York. I practiced law in New York, although my practice in New York was not unpleasant. I was in the law firm of who became Secretary of State Cyrus Vance. I was in the law firm Simpson, Baxter, and Bartlett on Wall Street. Now we're no longer on Wall Street. We are Midtown. Huge law firm. And very professional, very good. I can recommend it. We got good lawyers in there. Except that I ended up doing financing of public utilities, the S1s and the S7s for the Securities and Exchange Commission. That is deadly boring. Really. Yeah. It is very technical. Meticulous. I mean, you make a mistake, the consequences are millions. So, again, I said, do you want to do this for the rest of your life? Even if I had a great salary? Answer, no. So I got a Fulbright, went to Germany, finished my doctorate in history because I had also in my BA, my bachelor's was in philosophy and history. I wanted to teach history, which is my passion, not law. History major, you start with that. As a lawyer, you make money. Anybody can use a lawyer, whereas a historian can be used as you're lucky to teach high school. But otherwise, going back to my career, I was 7 years in Germany in the 1970s and 80s. And then I came to the United Nations, and I came to the United Nations. I was hired personally by the great professor, director of the Human Rights Office, Theo van Boven. We were a small office, huh? We were 51 people.
So,
but it was genuine. The Center for Human Rights was genuine. We meant it. We were professional. We were committed. Whereas today, it's an industry. That's why I wrote my book, The Human Rights Industry, because we are paper pushers, and the office has been thoroughly penetrated. I would say 80% of the Secretariat is ideologically in the service of Washington and or Brussels or both. We are in the service of the collective West, and we don't actually have much left over for Latin America, Africa, and Asia.
Yes.
Some major reforms have to occur. In my book, The Building a Just World Order, I formulated 25 principles of international order. And if those principles were, shall we say, disseminated, became, second nature, we wouldn't have the mess that we have today. And I don't only go around belly aching and giving you a dark and sad diagnosis. I do the extra mile. I formulate concrete, implementable, pragmatic recommendations. Are they enforced? Are they implemented? Of course not. Because, our world has been thoroughly hijacked. I mean, our world is Orwellian, it's Machiavellian. There's not a single statesman in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in France, in Germany.
Yes, it's all depressing.
My hope for humanity, for the survival of this wonderful planet, is the global South. My hope is those progressive countries in Latin America, in Africa, and in Asia who believe in the United Nations Charter. As I say, we have a charter. This is our world constitution. And the International Court of Justice is the world constitutional court. Now, the International Court of Justice comes out with 3 advisory opinions on Palestine.
Yep.
Has any of it ever been implemented? No, because the United States put in the veto. United States has put in more than 60 vetoes just to shield Israel from responsibility.
Yes.
Shield Israel from United Nations sanctions. Shield Israel from boycott, divest, and sanction.
Yeah.
The S movement is probably the only thing that would vindicate those 3 advisory opinions of the International Court of Justice. Because if you have a genocidal state, I mean, a genocidal government, I'm not saying the Jewish people, matter of fact, the curse of this genocide is going to fall back on the Jewish people, the Israelis, and many future generations that will have to come to grips with the horror of this co-responsibility, like the Germans had to deal with the horror of the Holocaust. In any event, there are tremendous numbers of Jews in Israel, and I know many, in the United Kingdom. Professor Ilan Pape, not far away from you in Exeter.
Yes.
In the United States, my friend Norman Finkelstein, my friend Jeffrey Sachs, my friend Stephen Kinzer. I mean, these are Jews who have values, Jews who have every right to be proud of the Jewish heritage, who are very proud of this great contribution that Jews have made to humanity, including Sigmund Freud and Albert Einstein, who, by the way, back in 1933, upon the request of the League of Nations, wrote a very important book, Why War?, published by the League of Nations. And I've taken that book to the Security Council and to the General Assembly, and I've held it up and said, look, guys, why didn't our parents and grandparents implement these concrete, pragmatic recommendations of Einstein to avoid war, to prevent war? And I'm a member, as I said, of the Geneva International Peace Research Institute. And we put out books like this, like Quelle voie vers la paix, which ways, so which avenues toward peace. As the case may be, the hegemonial capitalist world does not want any of that. They're making billions and billions in the sale of arms, in the production and the sale of arms. And of course, the whole thing is a revolving door. As you know, the military-industrial complex basically buys the Congress, buys the senator, buys the representatives, and then the representatives, by way of thanks, they vote huge $1 trillion military budgets. And then, of course, we produce more missiles and more ammunition and more.
Alfred is crazy. I can never understand this, because what that does is it's actually against the people of America. It actually damages and harms not just the citizens of the world, but the citizens of America primarily. And I just don't understand how that.
We don't put the money into schools, into healthcare,
Yes,
into infrastructure. Every time I read that a bridge has fallen into the Mississippi, I say, it's really not funny, because people die when these things happen. But why do these things happen? Lack of maintenance.
yes.
Remember the Katrina disaster in New Orleans? And I have many friends in New Orleans. The Katrina disaster was predicted in Scientific America 5 years before.
Yes.
Then 3 years before, there was a follow-up in National Geographic that said, if we get hit by a Category 5 a hurricane, this is going to happen. And exactly that happened.
And that
Not
happened.
that anyone took any measures to prevent it? Of course not, because who's going to die? All these Afro-American,
Yes.
all the poor. That they live in the areas that got inundated. Those are the people who got hit by the Katrina disaster.
Yes, it's unbelievable how much poverty there is within America, one of the biggest economies in the world. Alfred, can I just ask you? So you mentioned when you started your work in the United Nations, you had a great team that you were working with, and then now where we are, things have kind of deteriorated so much that it's kind of unrecognizable from where you started. So how did we slide down to this point where we are now? And how did that happen?
The house has been essentially hijacked, penetrated. The CIA approached me when I was a senior lawyer at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. I was approached not once, but twice to become a mole.
Wow.
I told them, go jump in Lake Geneva, because I'm not going to be your mole. It's not my thing. How
did that conversation go, Alfred? Was it like incentives? Was it threats? What was they doing?
They first made friends with me from the U.S. mission. They first made friends with me, and it was only about 1 year down the road that the first offer was made. And I just said, look, I just don't have the gift. I mean, you have to be gifted to be a good spy. If I have a coffee with you, and then half an hour later, I'm going to report to somebody else what you told me, you're going to see it on my face. I said, that's in my Cuban temperament. You asked me about my Cuban background. Yes. I mean, I am the worst possible actor. I mean, my feeling was on my face.
Yes.
I mean, you can read it. And as I say, I cannot dissimulate. I cannot possibly try to scam you, because I don't know how to do it. I mean, I wrote an article for Counter Punch called A Culture of Cheating. And I referred that to U.S. education. Cheating in the United States is almost a virtue. Cheating means that you're clever, that you can take advantage of the other guy, that you can use a half narrative that will seduce your opponent, and you will set a trap for your opponent. It's going to fall into it. I always rejected that. Somehow in my Catholic Jesuit education, I couldn't accept that. For me, it is anti-religion. It is so unethical to be constantly trying to take advantage of somebody else. It's like in 1989, 90, 91, when George H.W. Bush and James Baker took advantage of Gorbachev. Gorbachev, a blue-eyed optimist, thought that by withdrawing Soviet troops from Central Europe and showing his willingness to end the Cold War and cooperate with the West, that the West would embrace him and say, no, in the future we can finally have peace, we can have disarmament for development, and just convert military first economies into human security economies. That was the dream of Gorbachev, whom, by the way, I met several times, and I had enormous respect for the man, except that he was naive. He let himself be taken advantage of. Yeah. And the great criminal here is Bill Clinton, because Bill Clinton didn't have to push the expansion eastward of the NATO, contrary to concrete promises having been made to Gorbachev. And we thought we just simply push it down their throats because they couldn't do anything about it. Yes. And see, this is this attitude. If I can get away with it, I can do it.
Alfred, hey there. I hope you're enjoying this episode. Let me just take a moment to introduce our sponsors for today. This episode is kindly being sponsored by the Worldwide Listings Company Limited, or WLC for short. WLC is a complete A to Z Amazon account management service. So if you're looking to start an e-commerce business, or you already have a business that you want to take to the next level, then get in touch and WLC will be able to help. Just for transparency purposes, let me also mention that WLC is a company that I personally created and am a director of. So when you get in touch with WLC, you will be speaking with directly myself or my team, and we very much look forward to speaking with you to see how we can serve your needs. Thank you. And with that said, let's get back to the episode. Tell me one thing. So you brought up Russia. If we talk about the Ukrainian-Russian war, I've heard your talks on neutrality studies, other platforms, excellent interviews. A lot of the views that you hold I have very similar views. And I was talking to some relatives the other day, and they were saying, how can you be sympathetic towards the Russian position when Russia clearly the aggressor and they're the ones who have just invaded Ukraine? So how do you answer that? How do you see the position of Russia, Ukraine, and NATO in this whole war?
As I wrote already 2 months into the war, I write every month in the staff magazine of the United Nations. I'm a good friend of the editor-in-chief, and he allows me to write, shall we say, controversial pieces. And I wrote an article under the title, Precedents of Permissibility. I started that article by saying the invasion of Ukraine by Russia on the 24th of February 2022 is a clear violation of Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the UN Charter. It's a violation of the prohibition of the use of force. Yeah. But the fact is that this same Article 2, Paragraph 4 prohibits the threat of the use of force, prohibits the provocation. Yeah. Now, if you install 12 CIA bases in Ukraine close to the Russian frontier. If you establish 32 bio labs working on biological work, if you arm the Ukraine to the teeth, if you promised Ukraine that they're going to be members of NATO, contrary to, well, that is an existential danger for Russia. And Russia would be blind, would be irresponsible not to factor that in.
Yeah.
And I always give the example, look, if China were to persuade Mexico to enter into a military alliance with China,
Yes.
The United States would immediately react,
Yes.
as it did back in 1962 in October, when the Soviet Union put missiles in Cuba.
Yes.
The United States, at that time, John F. Kennedy, said we won't tolerate missiles 90 miles away from Florida. So there was a quid pro quo. I remember the debates. I was in Chicago at the time. I watched them on television. The debates between Adlai Stevenson III for the United States and Valentin Zorin for the Soviet Union. By the way, I met Valentin Zorin later when I was a UN staffer. But they actually thrashed it out publicly. And that is a great utility of the United Nations, that you can give up steam, that you can, instead of immediately pushing the button and immediately shooting at each other, you can at least thrash it out publicly. Yeah. And as has been said very often, blah, blah is much better than boom, boom. And so it was that
I have not heard that one before.
withdrew its missile from Turkey, and the Soviet Union withdrew the missiles from Cuba.
Yes.
That was a compromise. Now, the Russians entered into Minsk I and Minsk II in 2014 and 2015, both very reasonable treaties,
yes,
sponsored by France and Germany. And the idea was, okay, you stop shooting at each other, number one. Number two, you sit down together with the Russian-speaking majorities of the Donbass,
yes,
and you reach a modus vivendi. You give them a generous autonomous status, like in so many countries that
yes,
have autonomous space. And they can do their thing. They can, cultivate their language, their culture, their traditions, everything without any interference from Kiev. That would have been entirely possible. And who violated it? 80% of the violations of the ceasefire were from Ukraine side.
Yes.
And that's why I'm saying the war in Ukraine was provoked. It was the provocation, the relentless provocation by NATO against Russia, that after 8 years of nonstop bunking, there was an answer. But Putin actually played the United Nations game, and he played it in good faith. He participated in all these so-called Normandy formats NETEX. He was with the OSCE. He tried to facilitate a peaceful solution. Article 2, paragraph 3 of the UN Charter obliges states to solve their differences by peaceful means. And that is what he did for 8 years.
Yes.
But as we know from Angela Merkel, in an infamous interview that she gave in Die Zeit, which was then confirmed by this nincompoop François Hollande, they actually entered into the Minsk agreement in bad faith.
Yes.
Meaning, as Angela Merkel confessed, the only purpose was to gain time so that they could arm Ukraine to the teeth. Now, don't ask me, go figure, why in the name of God would Angela Merkel make this totally useless confession? Because she has proven to the world, that the West, the collective West, is in bad faith. Has proven to the rest of the world that we took Putin for a ride. Now, nobody likes to be taken for a ride. Go back to my article, Precedents of Permissibility. Go back to my article, The Culture of Cheating. And obviously, the invasion was an aggression and it was a violation of international law. But the war didn't start on the 24th of February 2022. It started on the 22nd of February 2014, 8 years before. And it started with an illegal, unconstitutional coup d'etat financed by the West with the support of the United States and of the European Union. And this was intended essentially to so destabilize Russia. And as you know from the reports of several think tanks, including the RAND Corporation, essentially the idea is to so dismember Russia that American and Western transnationals can then administer the enormous natural resources of Russia. I mean, the idea, and there's many who have written about this. It's not even secret.
Not a secret.
The idea of breaking Russia into several pieces and then having them more or less under Western control. And the Russians are not stupid. I speak Russian. I have been in Russia very often. In fact, when I was still a staff member, I went as representative to the Russian minorities in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and I wrote 2 reports to the Security Council. And I also, of course, went to the Ministry for Russian minorities in Moscow, and we thrashed out. My reports were quite well received. Also, in 1994, I was the representative for the election in March 94, the parliamentary elections in Ukraine in June 94, the presidential. So I met Kravchuk and I met Kuchma and all of these people. I spoke with them in Russian. I crisscrossed the country, and obviously the East, the Donbass, and certainly Crimea, is overwhelmingly Russian, and they feel Russian.
Yes.
So don't try to Ukrainize them against their will. Just, they're there. They're peaceful people. They want to live together but don't try to force them to the Golden West. I mean, if the Russians of Lugansk and of Donetsk are happy being Russian, and they have historical, ethnic, religious links to Russia, to Moscow, etc., let them be. I mean, why do you want to make Ukrainians out of them? And that's part of the problem, this arrogance, this hubris of the West.
Yes, Alfred, I think it's so crazy. Ukraine had such an amazing opportunity to play that role of a buffer, a neutral state that could benefit from both sides, linguistically, ethnically, economically, and they didn't, and now they're suffering because of that. But what I find most crazy, Alfred, is the role of Europe and especially Germany, how they have kind of allowed this situation to damage Germany's own economy for the sake of America. How do you explain that?
Difficult to explain because I lived 7 years in Germany. And at the time, when I went there with a Fulbright fellowship, I was received with open arms. This was a Germany that I really admired.
Yeah.
And I made enormous, I wrote books, 3 books that became bestsellers in Germany. My first book being Nemesis at Potsdam, and then Die Wehrmacht War Crimes Bureau, then Anmerkungen in der Bible, and both among all the 3, more than 200,000 copies. And, for scholarly books to sell that many, it's something. Yeah. At that time, they were published in the best publishers in Germany, in Ullstein and in CH Beck and in Deutsche Taschenbuchverlag, etc. Kohlhammer. Today, they wouldn't touch me with a 12-foot pole. No way. There's been a degringolade, an intellectual and cognitive degringolade in Germany. Germany has lost its soul, really.
It's just so unexplainable. Alfred, sorry to cut you. I've got so many friends in Asia who are constantly asking me, how did Europe and Germany allow this situation? Why did they go along with it to destroy their own economy, to destroy their own society, to end up in this position? I just don't understand it. So maybe you can explain, yeah.
Well, you know the impact of psychology. You know the impact of Orwellian psychology. And what has happened in Germany is the sequel of the re-education program. The Germans were taught to hate themselves.
Yes,
the Germans
that's so
were
true.
taught to build their new identity not on Immanuel Kant, Goethe, Schiller, Beethoven, Brahms, Hermann Hesse, Rainer Maria Rilke. No. The 12 years of National Socialism is German. That's what we are. Our parents, our grandparents were all criminals, and we are genocidal monsters. And they actually taught the Germans self-hate.
Self-hate.
Destroy their soul. That was not the case in the 1970s. These people, I met many who had lived through the war, and many who had, as Helmut Kohl, whom I also knew personally, Helmut Kohl said the blessing of the später Geburt, of having been born later. So if you were at the time of the Second World War 10, 15 years old, they cannot blame you for what their parents had done.
Of course.
And so in the 70s and 80s, these Germans who still had a functioning brain and who were still not completely reprogrammed, through the re-education program. These Germans still believe in Immanuel Kant, in Goethe, in Schiller, in Rilke. But the generation that came after, and there was a Zäsur, there was a watershed moment in 1985-86, when there was a dispute among historians in Germany. And I participated quite actively in that dispute. On the one side were the classical professional historians like Klaus Hildebrand and Hagen Schulze and Michael Stürmer and Andreas Hillgruber, who was more or less my mentor, and Ernst Nolte. And on the other side were the politicians. On the other side was this rabble-rouser called Jürgen Habermas, who is supported by the mainstream media all the time. He's a philosopher, he's not a historian. On the other side, you had Wolfgang Wippermann, you had Wolfgang Benz, etc., etc. Basically, teleological historians. You want to arrive at this conclusion in history, and then you work back from it.
You work backwards.
You just select what's important for the narrative, and everything else is evacuated. And, well, although logically, you would say, Andreas Hillgruber and Nolte won the debate, the politicians saw benefit for them in aligning themselves with the destroyers of history, with people like Jürgen Habermas, etc., etc. And those are the ones that have been propagating the idea of German guilt. And you know the statement that after Auschwitz, it's impossible to write poetry. I mean, statements like that. And I remember in Dresden, you know that Dresden was annihilated in a totally terroristic attack on the night of the 13th of February 1945. It had zero military meaning, zero. I mean, it was not a military target. It had no munitions factories or tank factories or anything like that. And on top of it, it was full of refugees because at this time, the Soviet army was pushing from the east, and then there were millions of Germans on the run. I mean, millions of civilians from Silesia, from Breslau, fleeing west. And more or less the first big town they could find refuge in was Dresden. And then Dresden gets obliterated by 1,500 RFA planes that first threw bombs to knock out the roofs of the center of town, the very center of town. And then they threw in incendiary bombs with the result of a firestorm. And at the time, the International Committee of the Red Cross estimated a death toll of 275,000. Wow. I thought that was much too high. And subsequent historians came down to 130,000. I myself am persuaded that it was about 100,000 deaths. And then, typical for Germany, you're not supposed to be victims. They're supposed to be only perpetrators. There's a binary approach to German history. So the Germans have the role of the perpetrator. Yeah. They cannot be seen as being victims of war crimes of the good guys being the Brits. It's insane, totally illogical, but that is it.
Some of these same arguments are presented by the Israelis when they're now attacking Gaza, no?
Yeah, it's, I mean, it is narrative control. And then if you say, but, then you will be prosecuted.
Yeah.
I mean, I have not accepted a single invitation to speak in Germany for 6 years. And I used to be a, shall we say, well-received expert in the Bundestag.
I can't understand this German guilt and this.
In the Bundestag in the 90s and twice. Yeah.
It must be so sad for you to see this. Yeah, it must be so sad for you to see this decline of the German society on a personal level.
These idiots like Friedrich Merz and like Olaf Scholz and like Klingbeil and like Claudia Roth, like Annalena Baerbock, this impossible woman, stupid woman. But as I mean, they do not spoil my love for German culture. They do not spoil my love for Hermann Hesse and for Rainer Maria Rilke, or for the music, whether it be Brahms or whether it be Bruckner or whether it be Beethoven. That they cannot do. So if they have a psychological problem, terribly sorry.
That's their problem.
A historian, but I am not a psychoanalyst. I cannot help it. So what I do is I just simply don't go to Germany. Because if I were to lecture in Germany, as I lecture here in Switzerland, I'd be arrested.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's crazy.
Lecture about Gaza. If I call Gaza a genocide, they will tell me that I'm an anti-Semite.
Yeah.
And if I speak about Ukraine and I say that the war was provoked, then they will say that I am engaging in apology of war crimes and crimes against humanity by Russia. So,
and that's the exaggeration. I mean, there's so many decent journalists, activists being arrested, harassed by the police all over Europe, UK, France, Germany, all these countries. And it's so sad to see this decline of European intellectualism.
But the decline is worse than we think.
Yeah.
The decline is worse.
Yeah.
The European Court of Human Rights is part of that decline. The judges, and I know many, the judges are, shall we say, betraying their oath. The judges are not administering justice, they are administering politics. What is politically correct.
Yes.
They are all so serious of recent judgments of the European Court of Human Rights that I could tear apart as a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I sometimes to my students and I say, try to explain this. Because I teach history, world history, but I also teach international jurisprudence.
Yes.
And when I teach international jurisprudence, I like to give them specific cases and analyze them and say, try to tell me how they arrived at this conclusion. Because normally the facts wouldn't take you there. The facts would take you somewhere else.
Yes.
And you see, they are issuing a judgment that is quite clearly political. And they are going along with the persecution of people who are exercising their right of freedom of expression. And that's why I say I don't speak anymore in Germany because I think that I would be arrested.
Yeah.
Again, that is, of course, of course I can defend myself. Of course, at the end of the day, I'm going to be acquitted.
Yeah.
But that's not the idea.
That's not the point.
Lawfare, and this is lawfare. Lawfare is intended to intimidate.
Yes.
If you know that you can be arrested.
Yes. There's people whose homes have been broken into.
Because you don't want the huge legal cost of defending yourself.
Of course. It's just harassment.
On top of that, the disruption of your work.
Yeah.
Because I like to write. I like to publish. And if I have to defend myself against frivolous and vexatious accusation by the federal German federal government, then all my work stops. I cannot continue my scientific work.
I had so many questions to ask you, but I'm cognizant of your time. You have other commitments. Before you go, do you have to?
We can do a follow-up at another date, huh?
Yeah, sure.
The meeting. Nobody likes to listen to there's this expression, you can talk about anything, but not more than 45 minutes. And so in order to wrap this up, because there's something that I did want to say.
Yes.
There are blueprints for peace in Gaza.
Mhm.
The Trump peace plan is a non-starter. It is a non-brainer. It is a revolt against the United Nations Charter. It is an attempt to make the United Nations irrelevant. I'm against it. So is the rapporteur on Palestine, Professor Francesca Albanese, for whom I have an enormous respect.
Yeah.
Blueprints for peace in Palestine have been many, but the bad faith of the Israelis, whether it be in Madrid or in Oslo or elsewhere, together with Jimmy Carter, together with Bill Clinton, is legendary. Jimmy Carter, whom I knew well and I admired, did this book, Palestine Peace.
Yes.
Not Apartheid. That was 2006. In 2009, he came out with this one. We can have peace in the Holy Land. If this had been implemented, we would have peace in the Holy Land. But the fact is that Israel does not want peace in the Holy Land. They want the Holy Land for themselves only.
Yes.
They want to take it for themselves, and they want to expel every Palestinian. So it is, you go back to the book of Joshua and to the book of Samuel and to the extermination of the Canaanites and the Amalekites, etc. And it's even been quoted by Netanyahu. And I must say the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, the best High Commissioner we ever had. She was High Commissioner at the same time I was United Nations Rapporteur. She was the head of the International Independent Investigatory Commission on Palestine, and on the 16th of September this year, she presented her final report to the Human Rights Council. 72 pages, of course, demonstrating that what has happened is genocide, and what is continuing is genocide. She has explicitly rejected Trump's 20-point plan and this new so-called peace plan. Let me say, I'm very much happy that the level of violence has been reduced.
Of course.
I mean, the ceasefire is not a real ceasefire.
Ceasefire is not a peace deal, no.
Continuing the genocide, but it's continuing the genocide in slow motion.
Yes.
But to the extent that the degree of violence has decreased,
From out. Yes.
I could even go along with an international force that would keep the Israelis out and protect the Palestinian civilian population. Discard Trump's fantasies of a Gaza Riviera, for billionaires. What we need here, of course, is intellectual honesty. And what we need here is a commitment to peace, as indeed Jimmy Carter had. By the way, this is Jimmy Carter's signature. I have, I must say, a dozen of his books dedicated to me.
Wow.
And another thing I wanted to say, Blueprint for Peace in Ukraine. I published a Blueprint for Peace in Ukraine in December 22. I brought it up to date, and I published a new 10-point plan in 2024. It's been quoted, but of course, the United States and of course the European Union has absolutely no intention of going along with my recommendations, which also include the role of the United Nations conducting referenda to find out what people really want. But the problem is, as I said, not only is the media hijacked, not only is the media in the service of Washington and Brussels, not only are we getting fake news and fake history and fake law by the media, almost everything has been penetrated. Almost everything has been corrupted, including the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, Nobel Peace Prize is
A
effective.
scandal.
Yes.
This is the best book on the field by a Norwegian lawyer who just passed away at the age of 85, Frederick Heffermale. He's been I would say, ultimate expert on the last will and testament of Alfred Nobel. And in this book, he gives you all of the winners of the Nobel Peace Prize, and then criticizes them because they say on that same year, there were other candidates who did fit the conditions laid down by Alfred Nobel in his last will and testament. And he proposed that, of course, great people, and also people whom I knew personally, should have had it, including Federico Mayor Zaragoza, who was for many years the director of UNESCO, and who was the driving force behind the Declaration on a Culture of Peace, and of course the founder of the Foundation Culture of Peace. So he could have gotten it in 2021, and he definitely would have deserved it.
So nothing's
Another
changed,
person who would have deserved
except that things are getting worse with the Nobel Peace Prize. I think they should.
I mean, it is really, it is an insult to your
It is
intelligence,
an insult.
it's
Yeah.
an insult to my intelligence, it is an insult to the world, it is a betrayal of Alfred Nobel,
Yeah.
who wanted to give the award to those who did the most for building bridges,
Yes.
for understanding other people, for preventing war, for disarmament. And it is a disgrace that people like Barack Obama were, like Henry Kissinger, were given this award. But this year, 2025, you remember the absolutely laughable, ludicrous arguments put down by Donald Trump, this narcissist, this megalomaniac who thought that he should get it.
Yes.
But I mean, that would have been a scandal. But I mean, they made it almost even worse.
Yes.
They gave the award to Maria Corina Machado, who wants
her country to be invaded by America.
against her own country.
Yes.
I mean, this is treason.
Yeah.
Not only treason, this is the use of force prohibited in the United Nations Charter. This is interference in the internal affairs of other states, which is prohibited in international law.
Yeah.
This is customary international law. It is absolutely breathtaking what the Nobel Committee has done in destroying their own credibility. And as I say, in my book, the Human Rights Industry, which, by the way, got some very good reviews. Here's the human rights industry. And then here you see the deal. That is the United States that turns the United Nations and turns the World Economic Forum and turns NATO and turns everything. It's the complete corruption of the human rights protection system. And I sent you an article that I wrote back 2 years ago. Called "Who Will Guard Over the Guardian?" That is a quotation from the 6th satire by Juvenal, written 2,000 years ago. And the question is, quis custodiet ipso custodiet? I mean, what do you do if the institutions created to protect your rights betray? What do you do when those institutions, the European Court of Human Rights, the Human Rights Council,
It's so true.
are actually in the service of the hegemon? They are not in the service of humanity. They don't give a damn what you want. They are pushing the agenda of Washington and Brussels. That is the world today. And you'd better wake up. You'd better understand that, so that at least you don't trust institutions that do not deserve your trust.
Yes. Alfred, that's so true. And there's so many other things, sanctions, the Middle East crisis, so many other things I'd like to talk to you about, and maybe we can arrange another day. But I really thank you for your time today and your info.
I'll be available.
Thank you so much. And I'll put your links to your website and your articles on Counterpunch in the notes for people to...
Especially to my human rights trilogy.
Sure.
I want people to read this book, the Building a Just World Order. In many ways, is too scholarly and much thicker also. It's it's a very, very useful book on the theory and practice of self-determination, on with my 25 principles of international order. But the book that actually requires action, that should move you to action, is this one. Because I tell you, the system has to be reformed.
Yeah.
It cannot continue like it. And I tell you how to reform it. But what I need is, of course, visibility. I mean, that must make it to the through social media.
Yes.
To the average American, to the average Brit, to the average Frenchman and German. And as you can well imagine, although I give many interviews, CNN is not going to interview me. The BBC is not going to interview me.
Thankfully, the sensible generation is now completely ignoring those media outlets anyway. So I think they're kind of becoming irrelevant anyway. So it's their loss.
That's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping. But as I say, there's also a lot of fake news in the social media.
Yeah.
In YouTube, in particular in YouTube. And there's a lot of artificial intelligence and videos created by artificial intelligence that are likely to, shall we say, muddle the water.
See, these are even more topics I want to talk to you about next time. So let's leave this to next time, because AI and all of these things that are coming, what implications they're going to have on human rights and other things. Let's talk about that next time. Thank you so much for your time, Albert. I don't want to get you late for your next appointment.
Right. Take care.
All the very best. Thank you so much for your time today. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.